together for Morton.
I wasn't asking you to stop. Thank you so much. I surely recognize all of the options that you could have selected to be anywhere else other than here today. I'm glad you're here, and I'm looking forward to sharing some stories with you. For those of you who do not know, Disney Cruise Line takes the opportunity to invite selected retirees. So I am no longer a cast member. I have retired as of 2 years ago, to come in and share our experience and to share our stories. By show of hands, how many of you have met my friend Bruce Kimbrell? Okay, you need to lower your expectations. I've known Bruce for well over 20 years. I actually helped to recruit him to, we both worked for the Disney Institute for a period of time, and then he helped to recruit me for this opportunity. But Bruce is he's a legitimate Disney historian. I'm just a guy who's been around a long time. But I have some stories and memories that I would love to share with you. And the way that we've set this up is the first 5 sessions, starting today, are going to be, they're organized sequentially. Because I found that that's a real simple way to organize stuff. Like, well, this happened, and then this happened, and then this happened. So this is how it frames up. So today will be around really the 1970s, but going back even before that, actually. And I want to share my personal experience as Disney evolved, as things happened that would be the precursor for Walt Disney World. And I had connections to it. In some cases, when I was growing up, I didn't even know I had the connections until later, and I was able to put the pieces, and I want to share those with you. But we're going to go through pretty much decade by decade each day. And then coming into next week, I have some other types of sessions that I would like to share with you that are going to take us into some of the parks and give you my view, my perspective of what happens there, and give you some examples of what I have shared with clients and guests over almost 44 years. One of the other good things about being retired is I can say anything I want. Now, I just do that. I'm just trying to make the cruise folks nervous. This is a little high-level snapshot, and what I'm going to do first today is I'm going to give you share some career highlights. And I'm going to do that for 2 reasons. Number one, it will be a preview of things that I'm going to discuss in greater detail over the next few days. The other reason that I'm doing it is I'm hoping that there's something in my experience that you connect with, that you have an interest in. And maybe you would like to connect and chat about it. And, you can only go so far on a cruise ship. So we're all trapped here together. So if we run into each other and you want to chat, please do. If we find ourselves at a beverage station or in a hot tub or anything, don't be shy. I'm here for a reason, and I love to talk about these types of things in my experience, so don't hesitate to do that. I'm also very fortunate. I am accompanied by my wife, Wendy, wherever there she is now, in the pink Mickey shirt. Oh, bigger than that. As noted up here, we've been married 35 years. Actually, officially next month, it'll be 35 years. So we're calling this our anniversary trip. The bigger thing that she deserves recognition for is she's heard every one of these stories like 500 times. She's heard them so many times, she will often correct me and tell me I'm telling it wrong. So, you weren't there. I said, yeah, but it was July, not August. Okay. Very happy to have her here. She was a cast member as well for 22 years, so she has a perspective, and we love to talk about the things that we love. And I think that's one of the other advantages of us being here all together is I am going to make an assumption that we share a love or a passion or at least a deep interest in 2 key things. One of them is Disney, and the other is travel. So we're already connected in some way, and believe me, we have an opportunity to talk about both of those things ad nauseum. So we'll take advantage of that. So when I first began my Disney career back in 1979, I was a pirate at Pirates of the Caribbean. And that's where you're here, oh, becoming a Disney pirate. That's what we're going to talk about. I'll come back to the details of it, but that was my first role. And from there, I was fortunate to be selected to go and work at the Jungle Cruise. And because this was in 1979, I can say that I was a pirate before Johnny Depp and a Jungle Cruise skipper before The Rock. A long time before either one of those. So those are the first two roles that I had, and I spent a big part of those early years in operation. So now I know some of you are thinking, oh, Rob, I know that next slide is going to be a picture of you in a pirate costume with pink and purple striped socks, or on the Jungle Cruise brandishing that .38 caliber revolver, right? I'm sad to say that, to my knowledge, those photos don't exist. I did not. I may have been, if I'd seen them, I probably would have wanted to. However, I was still in high school, and our high school yearbook photographer came out one day. There was quite a few of us that had gotten jobs at Disney, and they came out to take pictures of all of us to include in the yearbook. And I remember posing for pictures. I'm thinking this is going to be fantastic. And at the end of the day, we found out, well, the photographer found out that they didn't have any film in their camera. So we had the chance. Now, so I will ask, though, if anybody was back in the late 70s, early 80s, and you were there, please go back, check your scrapbooks and your photo albums and any old, I don't know what kind of videos film they were using back then. But check those. If any of you have, maybe I'm there. It could be. So don't spend more than 30 or 40 hours doing it. But please help me out. That would be very, very helpful. I spent some time. So I stayed in Main Street and in Adventureland area for about 5 years. Moved on to transportation, to the WED transportation system. That was a fancy Disney word. WED stood for Walter Elias Disney. It's actually a separate company within part of Walt Disney World, but a separate company back then. Spent some time with our bus and monorail operations. I then moved on to a different type of job where I coordinated what was known as the World Showcase Fellowship Program, where we brought in representatives from all over the world to represent the countries in World Showcase. Now, even today, we have cultural representatives that come in and provide that cultural exchange experience for our guests. But this was a subset of that, and a very focused program. And this was also that point in time that I met Wendy. But I'm not telling you that story yet. You have to come back for that. Over time, when you are in a position that is more of a staff position, you're working behind the scenes, you're doing those things, you don't get seen as much. So I was told, hey, you want to get promoted, you need to go out and quote unquote pound the pavement. Excuse me. And so I went out and I went to Future World Attractions. I still remember all of the original soundtracks for all of those attractions in the early days of Epcot Center. And at that point, I was selected, voluntold. Anyway, they said, we need help opening another theme park in Paris, so I went over and I was on the opening crew for Disneyland Paris. I'll be sharing that story on Friday, and as well as some thoughts about what were some of the challenges, because I can't just not talk about that, right? I'll share some thoughts about that as well. And then also spent some time managing our guest relations team, specifically at Epcot Center, which included the World Key Information System. Is there anybody here that can say they made their first video call on the World Key Information System? Yeah, there's two. A very impactful technology, I know. But so that was fun, and you know, the phones, like if you were to call in and you wanted to ask questions about ticket prices and park hours or complain about something, you would call us. And I got to do that. And then I moved in the mid-90s to this new venture known as the Disney Institute. And the Disney Institute, my role initially was youth education programs, and those programs would, we bring primarily middle and high school students would come down with their teachers, and we'd teach them roller coaster physics and various other types of science, American history, and world cultures, those types of things. And so that was my entry into the Disney Institute, and the Disney Institute is really where I spent the last 20 or so years of my career. And for those of you who don't know, the Disney Institute exists as the external professional development and advisory division of the Walt Disney Company. So from that moment on, my audiences were 100% external, and we would work with organizations around the world sharing what we like to call the business behind the magic, how Disney looked at providing an exceptional service experience, how Disney looked at providing cast members an experience that would compel them to want to perform at a high level and also ideally want to stay for a long period of time. And also, what does it take to pull all that together is a lot of great leaders that really understand what is important and be able to inspire and engage individuals in order to bring that to life. So that was the last part of my career, and it literally took me and ultimately my family around the world. I'll share more about the details of it later, but we had the good fortune in 2011 to pack bags and move. Where is it? Okay, good. See, there's quizzes here. We actually moved to Singapore for 4.5 years. And so this was an opportunity for us to have a completely different experience for us, for our two sons. And we also fell in love with that part of the world. And we were so excited. On the last cruise, I was really focused a lot on the launch of the Disney Adventure, which is going to be based in Singapore starting in December. And I said, okay, well, come talk to us about all the potential ports of call, because we've been to all of them, and it's great. We can help you plan. And then I come to find out that these are going to be cruises to nowhere. The ship is so big, and there's so much entertainment on board. That's the thing. I was like, oh man. So unfortunately, those short cruises, I'm not going to get to go and do that. But we had the opportunity to spend time there. We went to Hong Kong Disneyland was my home park for that entire time, as well Tokyo, and then subsequently Shanghai Disney, and then we've been back to all of them several times. And it was interesting, just last month in March, we were in Tokyo, and we were Tokyo Disneyland on March 12th. Then we got on a plane, and we were at Disneyland in California on March 12th. Yeah, we're nuts. We're absolutely nuts. But Singapore, they're very excited. They take bus routes very, very seriously. So we saw, when you see this, you know it's official. You know it's coming. And so very excited to see how that plays out. And with the other ships that have been announced so far, it's just so much fun to see the cruise line growing the way that it is such a fantastic product. And the fact that I get to be here for even a few minutes to talk on a cruise line stage is like a dream come true. So after 44 years, to have anything be at that caliber means it's a pretty big deal to me. I mentioned briefly, we have two sons. And our two sons have followed in their parents' footsteps. Okay, quick quiz. My first job was what? Our son Brian, last fall, Disney College program. He's got one more semester left before he graduates at Pirates of the Caribbean. On the last cruise, we knew he was selected, and we knew the area he was working, but we had no idea he was going to be a pirate. It's like, I wanted to announce it so bad, and I couldn't, and I didn't know for sure. And then our older son is a mechanical engineering graduate, and he has a role as well. So that's Brian and Steven. Brian went on to work at Dinosaur, As we all know, he won't work there for long, but that's where the job was. So we're very proud of him. We have so much fun, especially with Brian, because he comes and loves to come and tell us stories. This happened, this, I mean, he has a list of stories he wants to tell us. And every time I lean over to Wendy, I told my parents the same story 45 years ago. Now, a lot has changed, but really a lot hasn't. So we've had some wonderful times together. So let's focus on what the rest of our time is going to be like today. I wanted to go back and talk a little bit about what it was like growing up in Central Florida. And this is before Disney happened, and really leading up to that first visit to the Magic Kingdom. It's a little blurry in my head, but that's okay. Then we're going to dive into the spring break job, which is my first opportunity to become a pirate, and then realization that I was learning and working with people who had learned directly from Walt Disney. You know, talk about degrees of separation. It was minimal, and it was powerful. And so we'll share a little bit about that. But right now, I'd like to learn a little bit more about you. I'm making some assumptions about the makeup of this audience, but if you will indulge me, I just want to make sure that I can validate my assumptions, or you can correct me, all right? So first of all, in the spirit of my time at the Jungle Cruise, I need to please ask you to rise like bread. It's the yeast you can do for me. If you're able to, please rise like, okay, no loafing. Yeah, it's going to be a long day. So first I'd like to ask if there are any current or former Disney cast members, raise your hand. Wow, okay, awesome. I'd love to chat with all of you at some point. Thank you very much for all you do and have done. Okay, remain standing. I'm afraid to ask this question. I'm going to step back. I don't want anybody to poke my eye out. Are you a DVC member? Okay, oh, not as many as I thought. I noticed that the ship is crawling. Oh, that's not the best word. There is a large population. Okay, terrific. Remain standing. Okay, now, here we're going to go. If you have visited 3 or more Disney park locations, remain standing. Everybody else can have a seat. All right. You know where we're going to go on this one, right? How about 4? If you've been to 4 or more, remain standing. Look around the room. Look at this. Okay. All right. 5. And can you say, anybody other than Wendy and me, have you visited all Disney park locations? Okay. All right, awesome. Okay, I like 3 of you, right? Okay. If you need to leave now and like go plan your next Disney vacation, that's okay. I understand. I'm not going to stop you. But we had the good fortune to be able to do this. But Wendy and I, we've been to all of them in the last 2 years. How many of you are going? Anybody going to Paris after the cruise? On the 20, we're going to be there on the 21st. Anybody wants to hang out? Let us know. We're going back because why not? We're in Europe. You know, all of a sudden, when it comes to Disneyland, Europe's small, and it's easy to get to. It's not really, but we're gonna make it work. So I ask you that because I like to have a snapshot of who's in the audience, but also out of respect to all of you that have a love of Disney, have significant experience with our brand, I need to share something with you because in many cases, there's going to be elements about things about Disney that you know more than I do. In some cases, that's not even going to be a reach. But here's what I need to ask you to do. Please, never let the facts get in the way of a good story. Now, I don't know who said this first, but I'm going to attribute that to every Jungle Cruise skipper ever. So the challenge is, from time to time, when you've been around as long as I have, the dates get messed up or a name, all of this, really is probably not going to matter. So all I ask of you, please Because it just doesn't matter. If it matters to you, if you really need to talk about it, we'll talk about it. All right. So I said we're going to talk a little bit about history. So I grew up in a little town called Mount Dora in Florida, in Central Florida. And Mount Dora is a beautiful little town. It almost looks like New England in the middle of Florida. It makes no sense, and there's not really a mountain there. But it's about 45 minutes due north of Walt Disney World. And so we're very close, and then as a result of that, we heard a lot about the rumors. Now, when I grew up, this is anything related to Disney or Disneyland, I would never, ever be in a position to go to Disneyland. You know, that was the world I grew up in. It was on the other side of the country. I probably would never make it west of the Mississippi in my mind at that time. But, you know, we get very excited about things, about the potential. And when it was announced, unbelievable. I'll come back to that. So, but there were some connections near where we grew up that were very connections to Disney and the Disney family that I had no idea until later in life, but I was fascinated by. Anybody know who this is?
Walt's parents.
Walt's parents.
Got married in Florida.
Got married in Florida. They got married in Florida. This is the marriage. This is like one of my prized possessions. Is a copy of their marriage license. In December of 1987, in a little town called Akron, Florida, that does not exist anymore, but was probably about 6 or 7 miles from the house I grew up in. In fact, even closer than that, Walt's oldest brother, Herbert, was born in the town of Sorrento. Oh, here's another Let It Go example. Some of the pictures I'm going to share with you are going to look like this. Because they're either old, or more likely, I took them. So, once again, I'm going to ask you to. Thank you. All right. So, that little town doesn't exist anymore. But is near the current day town of Paisley, Florida, and in fact the Call family. So it's Elias Disney, Flora Call, or Walt's parents, the Call family. Their family plot is right there, and so you can go by and you can go look at it if you were ever interested in doing that. But like I said, this idea of Disneyland and never being able to do that. When somebody said, "Oh, Disney's coming to Florida," you don't believe it, and it was a mystery for years. Nobody knew. Somebody was buying a lot of land, but nobody really knew what it was. It could have been Martin Marietta, which was before Lockheed Martin, the merger and everything. There's rumors about that. Was it going to be military? Was it going to be something? But at some point, a reporter broke the story, and you had headlines like this that, oh, look, this is what's going to happen. This is who's coming. This is what it's going to be. And it was beyond belief. And we got so excited, so focused on it. And then all of a sudden, I find out that I know somebody who helped make it happen. This is Henry Land, state representative from Orange County, Florida, where the majority of Walt Disney World is, up in Tallahassee, and was involved in the signing of the original legislation that it was the founding of the Reedy Creek Improvement District. It set everything in motion for Disney to be able to do what Disney wanted to do on that vast amount of property. And Henry Land is my sister's father-in-law. I grew up knowing him. I hadn't really made that connection as to what he was involved in. He and my father served on the board of the Central Florida Fair for years. And in fact, my brother-in-law has one of the pens that was used to sign that initial Disney legislation. And to have that connection and hear the stories of what had to happen to pull that off, because all of that had to be in place, because you couldn't just say, okay, Disney, go in and do what you want. There were no building codes for a 180-foot tall fiberglass and steel castle. That it didn't exist. So much had to be done to establish the infrastructure to support the project, at least the initial project. And finally, it was interesting. After opening, I'm gonna jump ahead for a second. After opening, however, Henry regretted his decision in supporting it. And the reason was that Central Florida was an agricultural community. He was a farmer. My dad was involved in agriculture, and they saw that changing. So as a result, he never once set foot on Disney property after it opened. But it wouldn't have been there without him. Maybe there'll be a couple of stories you hadn't heard before. Finally, there was an official announcement. Walt Disney World was coming. Of course, historically, we know Walt Disney passed away in 1966. The original name of the project in Florida was going to be Disney World, one word, like Disneyland, and it was his brother Roy and a few others that were absolutely emphatic that they should change the name to Walt Disney World so that no one would ever forget that it was Walt's vision, it was Walt's dream that was going to be brought to life. And that's why it is known as Walt Disney World or the Walt Disney World Resort as opposed to just Disney World. But all of that had to happen. And, we knew somebody was buying up land, they were doing it covertly. And even today, if you go to the Magic Kingdom on Main Street, there's a window and it says up at the top, again, I took the picture, that's why it looks like this. It's a real estate investment company, and it's the name of the investment company is MT Lots. Empty Lots. But the real fun one is opposite that, right next to it, are all of the dummy corporations that have been created to come in and buy the land up a little bit at a time. So you can see that today, and but so some of the names are really funny. I-4 Corporation. Anybody who lives in Orlando, you know what that is. Bay Lake Properties, Reedy Creek Ranch Lands, and so forth. So that's what enabled this land to be amassed, so they wouldn't have the same challenges that Walt had at Disneyland, where they became landlocked almost immediately. And so this announcement was made, we knew this was happening, and my parents would love to go on Sunday drives to see if we could go out and see what was going on. You couldn't see much, because the initial construction kind of looked like what's on the bottom right. You're not going to get close enough to get that kind of a picture, but one of the things that we did a few times, there's a tower that still exists in the town of Claremont, just west of Walt Disney World, or kind of northwest, and I think it's like less than 300 feet tall, but the idea was they built a tower so you could go up and look at orange groves that don't exist anymore. But it's still there, and you see the sign up there, Disney World, and you could look in that direction, and with really good binoculars, you could see that things were rising up. So we were so excited, so we would go there and go to the top of the Citrus Tower just to watch that. And at the same time, we were all excited because we're hearing rumors about what was going to be there. And obviously the theme park, and there's going to be a castle, and there's going to be attractions and all of this kind of stuff. And one of the things that my dad was really interested in, and so was I, was the fact that it was going to have its own airport. Some of you, people talked about this for a long time. It's a STOL port. STOL means short takeoff and landing. This is what it originally looked like. Now you see what it looks like. This picture was from in the last year. So you can go by and look at it. And it was an important part of the history. It never really, it took off. But it was a vision of, we're going to create this place that is very unique and unlike any other. And even up until the time I retired, one of the roles that I took on at the Disney Institute, whenever we would have somebody join our organization, I would take them on what became known as the Rob Tour. And we'd spend several hours, and it would be driving around our property, talking about stories. I'd talk about Henry Land, and I would share that, and Reedy Creek, and whatnot. And one of the first stops we'd make is I would go and I'd park the car on the runway. And then make them tell me what it was, and they never knew. They might have heard it in history, but they'd never been there. They'd never seen it. Years later, I learned how to drive a bus on the runway. I wasn't driving so fast that I could take off, but I got to learn how to drive a bus on the runway. But it's still there today. And another connection to Disney history that is very close to home, literally, is the early, during construction, the key executives like Roy Disney, Joe Fowler, Admiral Joe Fowler, General Joe Potter, people that were involved directly in leading the construction effort, they lived on this street. This is Tibbet Bay Drive in the community of Bay Hill. For those of you who are golfers or like golf, you know about Bay Hill. This is Roy Disney's home. And when I run most mornings, I run past these houses. And if you would like to stay there, they are operated by the Bay Hill, now owned and operated by the Bay Hill Club and Lodge, so you could actually go and stay there for a lot of money. But it's part of the history that's still there. This house specifically was one that was where Roy Disney stayed. And there's lots of stories about how they would have meetings over their barbecues and so forth. That it sounds like it would have been a really interesting environment to be a part of way back then. I'm going to shift away from Disney for just a moment, because at this same time when all of this was happening, a vivid memory for me, something else was happening. And we were launching Apollo rockets. And from Central Florida, you could see them. So I have a certificate that says I was on the beach when Apollo 11 launched. This isn't the original, because my original was anyway, but you get the idea. So we got this. That was a very exciting thing. My parents and I were on vacation. We went over there. We did that. Then we went down to Miami. We spent the day at the Miami Aquarium, and as we were leaving, we heard the moon landing on the radio. And there was an announcement that said there will be a live broadcast tonight from the moon. We drove around for hours and landed at this hotel because it had a color television. What do we know about the broadcast? I never let my dad forget that one. That was hysterical. It was almost trying to find a color television was almost as tough as finding a hotel with air conditioning back then. So one day, the Walt Disney World opened, but I still didn't know. Well, hopefully I go someday. But there was a day in early 1972, we were having our Sunday dinner, and my parents just said, "Do you want to go to the Magic Kingdom?" Yes. So we went. Now these are not pictures that I took, but they're representative of things that I remember. And so this is the original Tomorrowland. When we were just in Tokyo Disneyland, it has the same Tomorrowland from that, and it was just this wonderful throwback. Swan boats. I thought they were so cool looking. I did have the opportunity to learn how to drive them before they went away permanently. And then this. Coming soon. This idea of Pirates of the Caribbean. And again, I didn't know what that was, but pirates sounded pretty cool. So it built up the anticipation, right? And one other thing I remember about attractions is in the evening before we were leaving, they were going to take me to the Haunted Mansion. And back then, there were no trees around, everything was, and it seemed massive. This is the picture I got, it felt like this, because I'm still pretty young. And I believed ghosts were real when I left that. It was, I said, I can't believe that somebody created something like that. It was so overwhelming. And then one other thing I remember, I found this pad. I'm curious if any of you remember Invisible Dogs. Yeah. Now, fortunately, invisible dogs did not leave invisible. Never mind. All right. So you came here to say becoming a Disney pirate. That sounds like a good title. Is he ever going to talk about it? No, wait another 20. Okay, no. So let's talk a little bit about that. This is the spring break job. Mount Dora High School. 1979. Disney, back then, it wasn't like busy all the time. You know, spring break, busy. You know, summer, busy. Christmas and New Year's, busy. Other than that, so they would hire people just to work a week or two at a time. So it was spring break, they came, they interviewed us at the high school. Some of our teachers had already, you could tell anybody who got hired by Disney because all of a sudden they'd show up, brutal haircut. And I back then, I had like Saturday Night Fever hair, you know, and so it was traumatic. I went and got my hair cut, and I went to my mom's stylist, and she kept saying, it needs to be shorter. I know it's fine. It needs to be shorter. No, it's fine, it's fine. It's much shorter than I had it. It's fine, it's fine. So I went, and they offered me the position at Pirates of the Caribbean. I could not believe it. And then they told me, I need a haircut. So I dragged myself back, and she gave me the second haircut for free, which I always appreciated it for that. But I went, our first day, just like it is today, was Disney Traditions. So several of my high school classmates we were all working together. Most of them had been selected to work in food and beverage. One of my good friends, Dina, was selected to work on the Swan boats. And so we all went together, we had traditions together, and went out, got my costume, and then we went and saw where we needed to go, where the office was at Pirates of the Caribbean and so forth. And there was a 2-week period between when we had traditions and when our first day was going to be. And when I met the supervisor, they said, well, what are you doing next weekend? Because I was actually hired to work at Pirates of the Caribbean, but to do a very specific job. There were tickets then. And I'm just e-ticket. Okay. And they said, well, if you come next weekend and we can train you, we'll train you to load boats, we'll train you to unload boats, we'll train you to work in the control tower. Okay, I'm hooked, I'm ready to go. So I'd like to share with you the story of my first day at Pirates of the Caribbean. Friday afternoon, I don't know, I probably left school around 3 o'clock, and I'm driving to work and it was raining. To set the time period, Blondie's Heart of Glass was playing on the radio. I'll never forget that. I arrived there, I put on my costume. I remember how to get to Pirates of the Caribbean. I go and I show up in the office there, and the lead, kind of today you'd call them a coordinator, working foreman, looks up at me and goes, who are you? Well, I'm Rob, and so-and-so, supervisor's name, told me that if I came in I could train. Well, nobody told me. Have a seat. Phone call. So finally, they called down to another cast member. This is a Friday before spring break. It wasn't busy. Everybody that showed up to work that night was thinking, we're going to have an easy night. And this poor cast member, Diane, was now going to be stuck with a 16-year-old kid. And she walks into the office, she looks at me, and the first words out of her mouth, button your vest, we're not cool here. And that night, it was, and I don't blame her, we ended up becoming really good friends, but at that moment, it wasn't fair to her, and it wasn't fair to me, it just wasn't fair, but it was tough. It didn't go the way anybody would have expected it to be. And I drove home, and it was 2 o'clock in the morning or something by the time I got home, and my parents were, of course, waiting for me to get there. And I told my parents I didn't want to go back, that I wanted to quit. And my father, in his wisdom, said, it's kind of late to not go tomorrow. You know, he goes, go tomorrow. Well, it was already that day. Go today. And if you feel the same way tomorrow night, we'll support you, but give it one more day. And on Saturday morning, I show up. I walk into Adventureland, Pirates of the Caribbean, and the first thing I see is Rick, the real trainer, with a notebook, with a plan, and I had the best day of my life. I share that. You're going, well, that's kind of a bummer. Think about jobs that you have had, and think about the first day of that job, and how it went, or how it didn't go. And I share that story, and I've told many of our clients from Disney Institute that when they've been focused on, well, how do we onboard people? How do we make them feel welcome? How do we set people up for success? And I said, well, if you'd like to know how not to do it, let me give you an example. And so often you would hear, yeah, we kind of do that. They came this close to losing a 44-year cast member. Fortunately, it got a lot better from there. So what are some of the things that that I learned? Right at the beginning, some early lessons from Walt. The first one, and if you ask my sons right now, what did you learn from your father? What will you always remember that your father says all the time? Early is on time is late, late is unacceptable. Things have evolved over time. I still believe this. I mean, obsessively so. But we would show up. I mean, it was not uncommon for us to show up 2-3 hours before our shift because we wanted to be there. But we would never. The idea of being late, it wasn't even in the realm of possibility. One of the other key early lessons, and this one I think is so important, whatever you're asked to do, assuming it's legal, be the best there ever was at it. And I'm not saying that I was the best person to ever load a pirate. Yeah, actually I was the best. But I remember one time that I went, and this is very early on, and it was one of those like private parties at night. So the park closed, and then they were going to reopen for the private party, and they wanted me to clean a stairwell full of leaves and dirt and all of this stuff. And I went and I did it, and it was spotless. All of a sudden I realized this, if my dad asked me to do something like that at our house, I would have complained about it, and I would have done a really bad job in hopes that he would never ask me to do it again. But this one, I took pride in cleaning the stairwell. And I always thought that was important, that this concept of, you're going to get asked to do something. You may be asked to make the coffee one morning. You may be asked to help file something, to do something that you may believe is below the role that you have or the experience that you've brought. But the reality is, you can be the best that there ever was at it, and people will notice that, and that has served me well for 44 years. There's some examples of attention to detail. Now, there's millions of them, but there's like 2 or 3 that I remember from the really, those first few days that I can't believe this. So I would go and I would tell everybody. It's like, you can't imagine. Did you know? This is, it's a video. There's no sound intentionally, just go with me on it. You'll recognize this scene. If there is ever a smoke alarm at Pirates of the Caribbean, after you call 911, what you are supposed to, I don't know why I zoomed in on the dog, but anyway. But the idea is you've got these very realistic fire effects. Like the second thing that you do is you send somebody running down to turn those off. Because if anybody were to smell smoke and you look at this, all of a sudden that sort of real looking fire looks really real. So there was a switch that you would go and you turn off the fire effects. The other thing I learned is there's some, we could have made props in any way, and fiberglass was already a thing. You could have done all that. There were at that time 7, there's still 5 today, working doorbells inside Pirates of the Caribbean. You recognize this little area here, and here we go. That's one of 5 right now. You could go up and you can ring that. Well, you can't, but it's a ringable doorbell. And also at this time, it was fun. The last scene before they But Johnny Depp, I can talk about that later, Johnny Depp. But anyway, the last scene was known as the treasure scene, and it was just a room full of treasure and a lot of gold coins. And so I got to go out and I got to look at the gold coins, only to find out that they were all little tokens from the Court of the Two Sisters in New Orleans. Okay, random little detail stuff, but I thought that was fascinating back then, and I don't know how many people I told, well, you know, all the gold there, it's not real gold. Of course it's not real gold. But and this is where it came from and all this, and I thought at some point that maybe I'd get lucky and I get to have one of those, but I don't have any for some reason. But I did find that one, but they all looked exactly like that. Some of you who have, if Pirates of the Caribbean is a favorite of yours, you may have heard about a legend. You heard about George? No? Legend has it, apparently, that Pirates of the Caribbean is haunted by a former cast member. Something bad happened, and they are still there causing problems and wreaking havoc. And I've even heard people say, yeah, well, the cast members, they go into Pirates of the Caribbean every morning. They say, good morning, George, because if you don't, you're not riding Pirates that day. I never heard about George. But if any of you have, I'm here to tell you, I don't know. People do talk about it. I don't think George is a real thing. On the other hand, I do believe that Pirates is haunted. And if you want to talk about that, see me later and we'll talk about it. Okay. And then the last thing I want to share with you this morning is this idea of the ring. And early on, again, one of my first few days, I was at the supervisor's office, which was above Main Street. And tomorrow I'll show you a picture of where that was in relation to the outside. And there were these managers that were walking around, and they were all excited, and they were all doing this. Like, what is going on? They had received their 20-year service rings. And they had started at Disneyland. And they all said, okay, well, we got our rings now. It's at 1959, it's 20 years, now it's 1979, they're all going around, they're all excited. And I'm thinking, who in the world would work for any company for 20 years? Over time, it evolved from being the 20-year celebration to also being a retirement gift. So now I have two of them. And I'm wearing one. I always do. Now, why do I need two of these rings? Well, that's an interesting story. Because I had other options for my retirement gift. A mantle clock that I would have to dust, or a gold wristwatch that I would not wear, or I could get another ring. And Wendy, in her wisdom, goes, well, you know you have two sons, and at some point you're not going to be here. So, I have two rings, and soon enough they'll have one. I guess we're each going to have one too at some point. But here's the thing that when I think back to that time was that realization of this. We worked for leaders who had worked directly for Walt Disney. You could feel it. It was talked about every single day. And I think, you know, one of the biggest challenges as we have gotten away from that is this recognition that Walt Disney was a person. And you're going, well, of course he was, but I can tell you, there are people that come to work at Walt Disney World and our other parks that are very familiar with Disney as a brand. They are not familiar with Disney as a person. And I said, if I ever had a wish, if I had a dream that I could go back and really help people make that connection. I don't have a direct connection to Walt, but knowing that I worked with people that did, made those early years extra special. And I do believe that how how we approached our world at that time, and how we approached how we worked at that time, and how we approached the service that we provided at that time was directly connected to what it was intended to be. So that was very special, and I also attribute that to getting me off to the good start, because despite that first night of Pirates of the Caribbean, this was an opportunity to make a connection. And when you have an emotional connection, whether you are a customer or your employee or an employee, your likelihood to stay connected is much greater than not having that emotional connection. All right, so this was the first in a series. If you like hearing this kind of nonsense, come back tomorrow. And so, what are we going to talk about tomorrow? Well, tomorrow is titled something about the opening of Epcot Center, and we're going to talk about that. But first, I did work at the Jungle Cruise, and I'm sure you would like to explore that jungle a little bit further and maybe hear a few of my favorite jokes from the old days. I'm going to talk about a very unique role that I had during the opening of Epcot Center. In Search of Excellence, I'll describe that more, but it was so significant, not only in its moment in time, but ultimately in my career. I call it moving the magic, but my time in transportation, my starring role, albeit minor, at the opening of Disney MGM Studios. I still call it that. Let it go. And I'm going to end tomorrow with a parking lot love story. If nothing else, just come for that. Thank you so much for joining me.